What if your rejection was God's recognition? What if the silence you've been living through isn't absence, but assignment? You've prayed, you've fasted, you've cried out in your room when no one else could hear, and still the doors stayed closed. The phone didn't ring, the room went quiet, and somewhere in that deep spiritual stillness, you started to ask yourself, did God forget about me? But what if that rejection was heaven's strategy? What if the reason they walked away is because you were marked, not for comfort, not for applause, but for a divine war? See, we live in a world where many are called, but only a few are truly set apart. And being set apart is not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence. It comes with isolation. It comes with people looking at you like you're too intense, too deep, too spiritual. But here's the truth. You've been praying for purpose, but God's been preparing you for battle. And spiritual battle doesn't begin with fire from heaven. It begins with the quiet decisions, the private obedience, the moments when everyone else is sleeping and you're interceding, when everyone else is feasting but you're fasting. That's where chosen ones are made. That's where God trains his warriors. So if you felt left out, if you felt unseen, unheard, uninvited, let me tell you what no one else has. You're not forgotten, you're hidden. And there's a difference. See, when God is about to raise someone, he doesn't put them on display. He conceals them, he covers them. Because what's anointed has to be protected before it can be revealed. Maybe you've been thinking, why doesn't anyone recognize my fire, my calling, my hunger for God? But listen to me. Maybe it's because your calling isn't for recognition. Maybe it's for warfare. And that's why the room rejected you. That's why the friendship shifted. That's why the opportunity disappeared, because you weren't created to fit in. You were created to tear things down in the spirit. There is a reason why your journey hasn't looked like theirs. There is a reason why your path felt heavier. There is a reason why you kept hearing no, even when you were saying yes to God. You were chosen, not for comfort, but for confrontation. And right now, even as you watch this video, something inside you is awakening. It's not your imagination, it's not overthinking, it's the Holy Spirit stirring your spirit, reminding you of who you are. You weren't born for applause. You were born for impact. And impact doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being lit by heaven. So let me ask you again, what if this season of rejection is actually the doorway to your greatest spiritual assignment? Because the war you're feeling, it's not random. It's prophetic, and you're not crazy for feeling it. You're not dramatic for sensing it. You're not alone in this tension. You're just the one who's been set apart for it. And that's exactly where we're going next. So if your heart is stirring right now, if something deep within you is whispering, "This is for me," I want you to pause. Just stop for a moment, because this may not be just a video. This may be a divine interruption. The kind of moment where God speaks through something unexpected and reminds you that he sees you and he has not abandoned you. If you're facing a battle right now, spiritual, emotional, mental, if you're in a season where the silence feels louder than the promises, I want you to know this. You're not alone. And you're not fighting this by yourself. Leave your prayer request in the comments. Let us know what you're walking through. Be honest. Be bold, be vulnerable, not because we're here to collect comments, but because we're going to pray. Every name, every cry, every burden, we're lifting it up. This is a house of intercession, a space for warriors who are tired but not done. We don't pray casually, we go to war in the spirit, because if you've been set apart for a divine purpose, you're going to need people around you who understand what that cost feels like. And that's what this space is. It's more than content. It's a prophetic covering. So write it out. Say what you need. And as you do, take a moment to like this video. Not for vanity, but because every like pushes this word further. And someone else out there needs to hear this just like you did. Someone else is on the edge, and your action could be the reason they find what they've been needing to hear. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the time. Not because we're building a brand, but because we're building a remnant, a prophetic people who aren't here to entertain, but to awaken. This is just the beginning. And if this resonated with you, then what's coming next is something you won't want to miss. Let's go deeper. You're not like them. And deep down, you always knew. Even as a child, something felt different. The way you saw the world, the way your spirit responded when others laughed at things you couldn't ignore, the way your heart broke for people no one else noticed. That's not coincidence. That's calling. But calling doesn't begin with celebration. It begins with silence and separation. No one talks about the ache of being spiritually set apart. They talk about anointing, platforms, purpose, but they rarely mention the years of quiet, the invisible training, the spiritual exile, the misunderstood moments. Being chosen by God isn't always about being sent. Sometimes it's about being hidden. And when God hides you, it doesn't feel holy. It feels like rejection. Like being passed over, like being forgotten. People move on. Opportunities skip your name. Prayers seem unanswered. And in that wilderness, the mind begins to speak louder than the spirit. The enemy whispers lies that sound like your own thoughts. You're behind. You're not ready. You're not enough. But what if that space of silence, that season of loneliness, isn't punishment? What if it's the proving ground for something eternal? God doesn't rush the ones he plans to use deeply. He lets them break. He lets them be emptied. He lets them wander in hiddenness long enough to learn to hear his voice without the noise of applause. Because when the war comes, and it always comes for the chosen, what will sustain you won't be your followers, your talent, or your influence. It will be the voice you learned to trust in isolation. Many are called, but few are set apart. Fewer still survive the setting apart, because it strips you of pride. It breaks your rhythm. It confronts everything you thought you were. And in that raw, exposed place, God begins to rebuild. There's a kind of solitude that isn't empty. It's sacred. That moment when your prayers feel dry, your worship feels hollow, and yet you keep showing up. You still kneel. You still wait. That's where the fire is forged, not in front of crowds, but in the silence between you and heaven. And here's the truth most won't admit. There are times when being set apart feels cruel, when everyone else is laughing and you're grieving, when others are celebrating and you're fasting, when the Spirit presses on your heart in a room full of people and no one else seems to feel what you feel. That's the ache of the chosen, and it's not easy, but it's real. You've likely questioned it. Wondered if you made it all up, if maybe you misunderstood God. But the pain you feel, the disconnect, the distance, the desire for something deeper, it's not confusion, it's confirmation. The deeper the isolation, the deeper the call. There is nothing wrong with you. You're not too sensitive, you're not too intense, you're not imagining it. You've just been marked for something others won't understand because it wasn't given to them, it was given to you. The dreams, the burdens, the urgency in your spirit. That's the evidence. That's the echo of a God who called you long before anyone knew your name. And yes, it's lonely. Yes, it hurts. But you're not crazy for feeling this. You're just waking up to the reality that your spirit doesn't fit into spaces designed for convenience. You were never called to fit in. You were called to shift atmospheres, to intercede, to carry glory. And that kind of call costs something. God won't let you settle. That's why every time you try to compromise, something inside you breaks. That's why you feel restless in rooms where others are comfortable. That's why you keep feeling like something is missing, even when everything around you looks normal. You've been separated for a reason. You've been pulled out, not pushed away. You've been set apart, not as punishment, but as preparation. And if you felt this, if this word is resonating in your spirit, you're not alone. There are others like you, others who felt that same burning, that same ache, that same holy frustration. And they're finding this message the same way you are, because God is gathering his remnant. The ones who won't bow, the ones who won't settle, the ones who were hidden, not because they weren't valuable, but because they were too valuable to be exposed too early. If you know this is you, if you've ever sat in silence wondering why God feels distant while your heart is on fire, I want you to write it out, speak it, confess it in the comments. Say, "I've been set apart," or "I feel it." "I'm chosen," or just type "yes" if this word is reaching you where you are, and share your story, share your prayer request. Not because we need the algorithm to like us, but because we're building something here, a space where the spiritually exiled find their voice again, a community that doesn't just talk about God, but walks with Him, even when the path is lonely. Your comment might be the spark someone else needs to realize they're not walking through this alone. And as we continue, keep your heart open, because the silence you've been surviving might be the doorway to the battle God built you for. He didn't ask to be chosen. He didn't stand in line. He didn't campaign for it. He didn't even fully understand what it meant. But the mark was there. It had always been there, long before he could articulate his faith, long before he had language for spiritual warfare, long before he knew what calling meant. The chosen often walk through life carrying something invisible but heavy. It's not a physical burden, but it lives in the spirit, weighs on the heart and presses on the mind. It's a kind of spiritual tension that follows you into every room, a divine restlessness that makes you hyper-aware of things others ignore. You're not just watching life, you're discerning atmospheres. You're not just hearing people, you're picking up on what they're not saying. That's not anxiety. That's not paranoia. That's the consequence of being spiritually marked. People think the chosen are confident, powerful, bold, and maybe on the outside, that's how it looks. But internally, there's a war happening, a war between destiny and fear, between obedience and resistance, between trusting God and wanting to disappear. Because being chosen doesn't come with a manual, it comes with moments. Moments where you feel like something is being demanded of you, something you haven't even learned how to give yet. You start to feel the pull early, like your spirit is being trained before your body is ready. You find yourself responding to situations with more depth than others. You carry emotions heavier. You see things in people they don't even see in themselves. And that awareness can feel like a curse when you don't know what to do with it. Because here's the truth they don't teach you. When you're truly called, you feel the pressure long before you see the purpose. There's a weight that comes with revelation, a burden that sits on your chest, even when everything looks fine on the outside. You can't explain it to your friends. You can't shake it off. It lives with you. You try to live like everyone else, go out, relax, fit in. But something in your spirit won't let you settle. There's this internal stirring, a holy discontent, a constant invitation to something deeper. You can't numb it, you can't silence it, you can't sleep it away, because that's not emotion, that's assignment. And it doesn't always feel holy. Sometimes it feels like anxiety. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion, like a spiritual fatigue that no rest seems to fix. That's because the weight of the invisible calling isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. It's the pressure of carrying destiny while still learning how to walk. It's the tension of knowing there's more and not knowing how to get there. There are nights when your pillow is soaked with questions, mornings when your chest feels tight, not because of fear, but because of fullness, full of dreams, full of prophecy, full of a calling that hasn't yet found expression. And the hardest part? No one sees it. No one validates it. No one celebrates the unseen pressure. They only see the results once you step out, but they don't see the war it took to get there. You want to be obedient, but sometimes the weight of that obedience feels suffocating. Because obedience doesn't just require action, it demands surrender. And surrender isn't romantic, it's costly. It means laying down your timelines, your comfort, your image, your understanding. It means saying yes to God without having any details, only a burden and a whisper. Sometimes it feels like you're carrying something for a future you can't see yet, like you've been trusted with blueprints for a kingdom that hasn't been built. And in that spiritual construction site, all you have is prayer, obedience, and a conviction that won't leave you alone. You try to explain it, but people look at you like you're overthinking. They tell you to relax, to enjoy life, but they don't feel what you feel. They don't hear what you hear in the spirit. And so you keep carrying it quietly, smiling in public, breaking in private, praying between breaths, crying out between responsibilities. And even when you try to ignore it, it shows up in songs, in sermons, in random conversations that pierce your heart. It follows you, because calling doesn't clock out. It's not a role, it's not a task. It's an identity that follows you wherever you go, because heaven has marked you for more. And maybe that's why certain things didn't work out. Maybe that's why some environments became uncomfortable, why some people walked away, why you couldn't seem to settle like others. Because the invisible hand of God was pulling you, redirecting you, not to punish you, but to protect the assignment on your life. Even now, as you hear this, your heart is probably racing, your spirit is leaning in, not because of emotion, but because something inside you recognizes truth. The spirit in you is witnessing to the spirit in these words. You know what it feels like to carry something heavy and invisible. You know what it means to say yes in the dark, to obey without a map, to stand alone in faith while your world doesn't make sense. That's the weight of being chosen. That's the cost of a real calling. And you're not crazy for feeling it. You're not weak for struggling under it. You're not behind because you haven't figured it all out. You're right on schedule. And the pressure you feel is proof that heaven hasn't forgotten you. It's preparing you. And there is more. So much more, because the burden you carry now is only the beginning of the battle you were born to fight. The loudest sound in his life was God's silence, and not just any silence, the kind that lingers after you've prayed every prayer you know, after you've fasted, after you've worshipped when it hurt, after you've laid on your face night after night, whispering words between tears. It's the silence that doesn't just feel like absence. It feels like abandonment. It feels like heaven has turned its face, and all you're left with is the echo of your own voice bouncing off the walls of a closed sky. But here's what no one tells you when you say yes to God. Silence is part of the training, not punishment, not rejection, preparation. You're not being ignored. You're being sharpened. There's a stage in every real calling where the voice of God seems to fade, not because he's gone, but because he's doing something deeper than your ears can hear. It's the stage where faith stops being a feeling and starts being a decision, where trust is no longer a concept, it's a commitment. That's when you find out who you really are. Not when the prophecies are flowing, not when the doors are opening, but when everything goes quiet and your soul still chooses obedience. Because silence has a language, a spiritual code, and only those who have been through the fire know how to translate it. Heaven's silence doesn't mean God is uninterested. It means he's watching. It means he's letting your roots grow deeper in the dark. It means he's stripping you of every dependency so that your foundation will be him and only him. That's why it hurts. Because the silence isn't soft. It cuts. It cuts through your timelines. It cuts through your ego. It cuts through the false version of faith you were carrying. And in the silence, you're left asking hard questions, wrestling with disappointment, wondering if you missed it, wondering if he's changed his mind. But deep down, deep in your spirit, you know he hasn't gone anywhere. You just can't hear him the way you used to, because he's calling you into something higher. Maturity in the spirit begins where noise ends, and this is where many fall away, not because they stopped believing, but because they couldn't endure the silence. They confused the absence of sensation with the absence of God. But the chosen, the truly chosen, they learn to breathe in the quiet, to walk when there's no confirmation, to move with the memory of what he said, even when he's not saying anything now. God trains his warriors in the dark. That's where discipline is born. That's where hunger is refined. That's where pride dies. Because when there's no applause, no response, no goosebumps, and you still worship, that's when heaven nods. That's when you graduate from emotional faith to prophetic obedience, and there's something sacred about that kind of obedience, the kind that doesn't need evidence, The kind that says, even if I don't hear you, I'll follow what you already said. That's what separates vessels from weapons. A vessel carries glory, but a weapon carries authority, and authority is forged in silence. Sometimes you're not getting a new word because God is testing what you did with the last one. And that silence you're hearing, it's not because he stopped speaking. It's because he's watching your response. Will you keep showing up? Will you keep praying when it feels pointless? Will you still intercede when nothing changes? Will you keep standing when no one notices? The most powerful anointing doesn't come in a shout. It comes in a whisper that echoes for eternity. And only those who endure the silence get to hear it. So if you're in that place, that space between instruction and fulfillment, don't run, don't numb it, don't fake it, just stay. Sit in the silence. Let it do its work. Let it strip you. Let it anchor you. Because when God breaks the silence, everything shifts. But until then, remember this. You are not abandoned. You are being built. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. And you are not invisible to heaven. You are fully seen, fully known, and fully in process. And I know, it's hard to explain this season to people who haven't walked through it. They don't understand why you've gone quiet, why you've withdrawn, why you've stopped posting, stopped attending, stopped showing up. But you're not backsliding. You're being processed. Heaven has pulled you into a sacred stillness, and it will make sense, just not yet. What feels like silence is actually strategy. What feels like abandonment is actually acceleration. But it won't look like progress to people who measure movement by visibility. You know something is shifting, not because you can see it, but because you can feel it in your bones. That's how calling works. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And you have to quiet everything else to hear it. And if you've read this far, if you're still here, that's not by accident. It's because your spirit recognizes what your eyes can't yet see. You're in the middle of something divine, and heaven is closer than it feels. So if this resonates with your spirit, if you've felt the weight of God's silence and you've kept showing up anyway, I want you to let us know in the comments. Say, I'm still here, or type, I feel the silence, or drop the word processed. These aren't just comments, they're declarations. And if you're bold enough, share your story. Let us pray with you. We're not just building a channel, we're building an altar, one voice at a time. While others sleep, he's wide awake. While others celebrate, he's in the field. Not because he's bitter, not because he doesn't want to enjoy what others enjoy, but because he's carrying something different. A different urgency, a different responsibility, a different fire that refuses to let him rest. There's a moment in the life of every person marked by God when you realize you weren't chosen for comfort, you weren't selected for applause. You were summoned for battle, but not just any battle, a war no one else sees. A war in the spirit, a war that plays out in silent rooms, in whispered prayers, in midnight tears, and in decisions no one applauds. It's not public, it's not pretty, it's not polished, it's prophetic. The battle doesn't happen on stages or under spotlights. It happens in the shadows, in hidden places, in secret intercessions. It happens when your soul is pressed, your mind is tested, and your body is weary. But you get up anyway, you pray anyway, you show up anyway, because calling like this doesn't wait for ideal conditions. Calling like this doesn't check your schedule or your feelings. It demands your obedience when you're tired, when you're doubting, when everything inside you says you don't have what it takes. But something deeper, something eternal, says you were made for this. That's the thing about spiritual war. It doesn't come with clear uniforms. It doesn't come with a trumpet sound. It doesn't look like a battlefield. It looks like your life, your mind, your family, your atmosphere. And unless you've been awakened in the spirit, you'll miss it completely. This is why the chosen often feel overwhelmed, not because they're weak, but because they are living in two realms at the same time. They walk into rooms and sense what others can't feel. They wake up in the middle of the night with burdens that aren't even their own. They carry the weight of futures they haven't stepped into yet, because God has given them a glimpse, not to crush them, but to call them deeper. There's no manual for this, no clear checklist, no crowd cheering you on, just a still, persistent voice from heaven that says, go again, pray again, stand again. And you do, because something in you knows that this isn't just about you. It's bigger, it's generational, it's global, and it's urgent. Others may not see it. They may not understand why you're so intense, why you weep in worship, why you pace when you pray, why you can't just sit through surface-level conversations. But you weren't wired for surface. You were built for depth, because surface doesn't shift atmospheres. Depth does. Intercession does. Obedience does. You're not overthinking. You're discerning. You're not overreacting. You're sensing. You're not being dramatic. You're being drafted. And the draft isn't casual, it's divine. It's heaven saying, I need someone who will stand when others run. I need someone who will fight when others fold. And when God finds someone like that, someone willing to carry the cost, he gives them access others don't get, revelation others don't receive, authority others don't carry. But that access comes with a price, and that price is isolation, misunderstanding, pressure, and often silence. You don't get to have a casual walk with God and carry this kind of weight. You don't get to live comfortable and shift nations. You don't get to blend in and be a breaker in the spirit. And that's okay, because deep down, you've always known you were different. You're not exhausted because you're broken. You're exhausted because you've been battling, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically. And yet, you keep showing up. Because something in you refuses to quit. Because somewhere along the way you realized this isn't just about me. This is about the ones coming after me, the ones attached to my obedience, the ones whose freedom is linked to my fight. That's what makes you dangerous. Not your talent, not your platform. Your willingness to fight in the unseen, to stay planted when it hurts, to war in worship when you feel nothing, to declare truth when you're still bleeding from your own battle. And yes, it's tiring, but it's also sacred. Because the greatest warriors in the kingdom aren't the loudest. They're the ones who've been through the most and are still standing. Quiet, steady, marked, unshaken. They've lost things, they've been misunderstood, but they didn't quit. Because the battle isn't just what they do, it's who they are. The battlefield is not a place you go, it's who you've become. A vessel refined by fire, a soldier of the Spirit, a mouthpiece of heaven, a weapon in God's hand. And when you finally realize that, everything shifts. You stop asking to be seen. You stop begging to be validated. Because now, you know, God trusted you with this war because he knew you'd survive it. You're not fragile. You're forged. And what you carry doesn't need recognition. It needs release. So if you've been waking up heavy, if you've been praying differently, if you've been feeling isolated and spiritually stretched, you're not broken. You're being built. You're in the field while others sleep. Because your mission doesn't wait for convenience. And if this speaks to you, if you know in your spirit that you've been drafted into something divine, then say it, write it, declare it, comment, I've been called to the field, or I'm awake, or even just, I'm built for this. Every word you type is a signal in the spirit, a declaration, a surrender. We see you, we're with you. And heaven is still writing your story. The rejection was a sign. The pain was permission. And now the glory begins. But in the beginning, the chosen never see it that way. They don't recognize the signs for what they are. They just feel the weight of not belonging, the sting of being left out, the confusion of carrying something you can't name. You walk into rooms and feel tension, not because you're wrong, but because the room isn't ready for what's on your life. There's a moment in the journey of every chosen one where the fire within becomes undeniable. For a long time you wrestle with it. You try to tone it down, soften the edges, blend in, adapt, conform, because the pressure to be accepted is real. You just want peace. You just want people to understand. But no matter how hard you try, something about you disturbs the atmosphere. You feel misunderstood, not because you're unclear, but because you carry clarity that others aren't ready for. And then it happens, that moment, that breaking, that inner shift where you realize they didn't reject me because I wasn't enough. They rejected me because I was too much for their comfort. The rejection wasn't punishment. It was prophecy. It was protection. You weren't created to fit into every space. You were designed to shift it. That's when the mark begins to reveal itself, not in bright lights, not with public applause, but in the way heaven starts highlighting your steps. In the way you begin to recognize that the tension wasn't random, it was revelation. You start to understand that the restlessness you felt your whole life was spiritual signaling. It wasn't confusion. It was the early signs of divine alignment. People don't always know what to do with a person marked by God. They don't know how to respond to someone who carries presence instead of performance. Someone who walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere without saying a word. That's why they resist you. That's why they distance themselves, because what's on your life exposes what they've been avoiding. Your authenticity becomes a mirror. Your fire becomes a confrontation. Not because you're trying to be disruptive, but because God's mark disrupts anything that's been built on compromise. When God marks a person, He doesn't just give them a calling, He gives them a weight. And that weight starts making sense when you stop chasing approval and start embracing the assignment. You begin to walk differently. You pray with more authority. You hear more clearly. And you stop apologizing for your anointing. The truth is, the people around you weren't supposed to understand you, because if they did, they would have tried to contain you. But heaven never gave them the blueprint. It gave it to you. That's why you felt alone. That's why the doors didn't open. That's why certain opportunities kept slipping through your fingers. It's not because you were behind. It's because you were ahead. And now you're entering that moment. The divine shift where everything you've endured begins to make sense. The tears, the silence, the inner warfare. It wasn't for nothing. It was for glory. And not just glory that lifts your name, but glory that reflects His. The kind of glory that can't be explained, only carried. It's a dangerous thing to be marked by God, because it means you don't get to live like everyone else. You don't get to choose comfort over calling. You don't get to pretend you didn't hear Him when He spoke. That mark won't let you sleep on your purpose. It won't let you hide in the crowd. It won't let you settle for a life that looks good, but lacks spiritual weight. There's a fire on your life, and you're starting to realize that it wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to consume. And it's why certain spaces rejected you. They could sense the fire before you even knew you carried it. That's what happens when you've been touched by something holy. You stop blending in because your presence becomes prophetic. You start noticing things others miss. You speak and people pause, not because of your eloquence, but because of your authority. You walk into warfare and don't flinch, not because you're fearless, but because you've seen too much to doubt now. You're not operating from theory anymore. You're moving from revelation. This is where the glory begins. In the wreckage, in the pieces, in the unexplainable moments when heaven says, now they're ready. Now they understand what they carry. Now they know who they are. And in that realization, you begin to move like one who has been sent, not just saved, chosen, not just covered, prepared, not just protected. And even now, as you're listening, something is rising in you, a holy confidence, a quiet boldness, not arrogance, not hype, just the assurance that what you've been through wasn't wasted, it was weaving. God was weaving strength, wisdom, discernment, fire, authority, intercession into your very being, so that when the moment came, you wouldn't just feel ready, you would be undeniable. If your spirit knows this is true, if your heart is pounding right now and you're starting to see yourself in this word, I want you to speak it, declare it in the comments. Say, I was set apart, say the fire is real, or even just type, I'm marked. Not for me, not for views, for you, for your process, for your own confirmation. Because this is not just content, this is activation. And heaven is still speaking. This isn't just his story, it's yours. And deep down you know that. You didn't just click on a video. You were drawn here. Maybe you didn't even know why. Maybe it was just a title that echoed something buried inside you. But now you're hearing words that feel like memory, that sound like something you lived, something you felt but couldn't explain. And here's why. Because your journey is not random. It's prophetic. You are the one who's been walking through this in silence, thinking no one else could possibly understand. But you were wrong. You were never alone. You were hidden. That season of isolation you walked through, the people who disappeared, the doors that wouldn't open, the opportunities that felt so close but somehow slipped away. That wasn't rejection, that wasn't failure, that was concealment, divine, intentional, purposeful. Because when God marks a person for something extraordinary, he doesn't put them on display, not right away. He places them in obscurity, he covers them in quiet. He allows them to feel forgotten so they can learn the sound of his voice alone. You didn't miss it, you didn't lose it. You didn't mess it up. You were being refined, shaped, softened, sharpened, because what God placed on your life is weighty. It carries responsibility. It carries fire. And fire can't be handed to someone still seeking approval. So he let you walk alone, so your identity would no longer be attached to affirmation, so your voice would not echo the crowd, but carry the authority of one who's been with him in secret. You've been through battles that no one else saw. You've cried prayers that didn't have words. You've warred through nights that felt endless, just holding on to the promise that maybe, just maybe, there was more. And now here you are, and everything inside you is trembling because you're starting to see that all of it meant something. Every tear, every no, every silence, every closed door, it was all a part of the making. The crushing that brings the oil, the fire that reveals the gold, the process that produces the power. You weren't abandoned, you were trusted. God trusted you with pain that would shape your perspective. He trusted you with a silence that would sharpen your hearing. He trusted you with a burden that would drive you into deeper places, not because you were being punished, but because you were being positioned. Now the shift begins, not in your circumstances, but in your understanding. Because when you realize you're not just suffering, you're in training, everything changes. You stop asking why, and you start asking what. What are you doing in me, God? What are you preparing me for? What are you equipping me to carry? That's where power is born. That's where purpose takes root. And this shift, it's not just a moment. It's a mantle. It's the turning point where your pain becomes your pulpit, where your wounds become your witness, where everything that tried to break you now bows to the call of God on your life. You see, what you thought disqualified you, that trauma, that weakness, that season of failure, is actually the very thing God is using to qualify you, because he doesn't choose the strongest. He chooses the willing. He chooses the ones who stayed when it was hard, the ones who still prayed through silence, the ones who refused to let go of the promise even when the evidence was gone. You're not too late. You're not too broken. You're not behind. You're in the middle of a divine reversal. Heaven is calling you out of hiding, not because you've earned it, but because you survived it. You endured the making, and now God is revealing the message. And that message is not just for others. It's for you. It's the confirmation you've been crying out for. You're still chosen, you're still called, and most importantly, you're not alone. There are others, a remnant, scattered, silent, hidden, but alive, hungry, marked, and they are awakening just like you, all over the world. At the same time, in the same way, their spirits are stirring, their dreams are coming back, their prayers are shifting from desperation to declaration, because something is changing. The prophetic shift is here, and you're part of it. It's not just happening to others, it's happening to you. The very fact that you're hearing this word is evidence. You were drawn to it because your spirit recognizes the language. It's not hype, it's not emotionalism. It's the sound of destiny colliding with obedience, of heaven reminding earth, I have not forgotten you, I have hidden you, and now I'm calling you forth. And if this word has touched something deep in you, if it feels like your story, if your heart has been pounding and your eyes have welled up, don't brush it off. Respond to it. Say it out loud. Write it in the comments. Declare, I am not alone. Or, God hid me for a reason. Or simply, I'm part of the remnant. These are more than comments. They're prophetic agreements. They're the beginning of your next chapter, and the next chapter is already unfolding. He was rejected because he was ahead of his time, and you are too. That's the part they never told you. That being chosen isn't about being celebrated. It's about being concealed. It's about being misread, misunderstood, mislabeled. Not because you're wrong, but because you're early, because you carry something that hasn't fully arrived yet. You walk into rooms and sense things no one else discerns. You speak truth that feels like confrontation to those still clinging to comfort. You've spent most of your life wondering why you couldn't just blend in, why peace seemed to flee every time you tried to settle. But now, everything in your spirit is starting to make sense. You weren't made to settle. You were set apart to stir. The rejection wasn't an accident, it was revelation. A prophetic signpost pointing to the fact that what's on your life is not ordinary, it's disruptive. Not for the sake of rebellion, but for the sake of awakening. You are a breaker, a voice that doesn't echo culture, but cuts through it. A presence that shifts atmospheres not because of charisma, but because of consecration. And when you've been truly set apart, you realize you don't fit because you weren't formed by the world, you were forged by fire. This is the moment where everything changes, the moment when the realization hits. This isn't just about surviving pain, this is about answering a prophetic call. The war has always been around you, in your mind, in your soul, in your past. But now, the war is moving through you. You're not just enduring it anymore, you're engaging, standing, taking territory, because something deep inside you knows you were born for this. God didn't mark you for popularity, He marked you for power. The kind that's forged in silence, in wilderness, in delay, in rejection. You thought it was over, but it was only hidden. You thought the door was closed forever, but heaven was building a better one behind the veil. You thought you were stuck, but you were being stationed. And now the shift begins, a prophetic turn in your identity. You're not just someone with a testimony, you're a vessel with a mission, a voice with weight, a warrior with orders, and the time of hesitation is over. God is sounding the alarm. The remnant is rising, the atmosphere is changing, the enemy has overplayed his hand, and heaven is calling the hidden ones into the front lines. You've been trained in secret for a battle the world hasn't seen yet. That's why your process was so intense. That's why the pruning felt brutal, because God was building something inside you that could not collapse under public pressure. You carry revelation, intercession, strategy, fire. And that fire was not meant to be a flicker in private. It was meant to burn in public. You weren't preserved for comfort. You were prepared for confrontation. This is the unveiling, the release, the activation. Not because you're perfect, but because you're ready. And being ready doesn't mean you feel strong. It means you're finally surrendered. It means you've stopped trying to control the timeline and started trusting the God who authored it. It means you understand that your scars are sermons and your silence was seasoning, that nothing in your past disqualifies you. It all confirms you. The war you're about to enter isn't just about what's around you. It's about what's in you. It's not against flesh and blood. It's against patterns, mindsets, demonic cycles, and generational strongholds. And the weapons of this war are not carnal. They are prayer, prophecy, purity, presence, and obedience. And you carry them all. Not because you earned them, but because you were forged to wield them. You may still feel afraid. You may still have questions. That's okay. But now, your fear no longer stops you. It fuels you. Because you understand that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's obedience in the presence of it. And if you keep walking, even trembling, you will find that every step of obedience releases something in the spirit, shakes something in the heavenlies. And God is with you, not in concept, but in actual power. So here's what I need you to understand. The war is just beginning, not a war to destroy you, a war to reveal you, to unleash what's been cultivated in silence, to release the sound that hell tried to silence. You were separated for this war, and it begins now, not someday, not when you feel ready. Now, as you are, where you are, with what you have, because heaven doesn't wait for perfect conditions, it responds to surrendered hearts. And yours has been crying out, quietly, desperately, faithfully, even when no one saw, even when you felt like giving up. But God saw, and heaven took note, and now the moment has arrived. The silence is breaking, the hidden is being called out, and the chosen are being released. And if you felt this word in your bones, if your heart has been beating faster, if your soul has been trembling, if you've been on the edge of something but couldn't name it, this is it. This is your moment of clarity, your prophetic alignment, your invitation into everything you were born to carry. Let me know in the comments, have you ever felt rejected for a divine reason? And if you're ready for what comes next, say it, write it, declare it. Type, I was separated for this war, or I'm stepping out of hiding, or even, my time is now, because these aren't just comments. They're confirmation, they're surrender, they're prophecy in motion, and don't miss what's coming. Because this episode was just the beginning. What's next will shake you deeper. The next episode, and if the chosen one isn't losing, they're being purified for the final battle, because after rejection, after the fire, after the silence, comes the purification, and only those who survive the fire can carry the glory. If you felt the voice of God speak to you in this video, if something inside you woke up, if your spirit trembled even for a moment, don't leave without responding. This is your moment of alignment. Subscribe now, not just to follow a channel, but to stay connected to a prophetic stream that is calling out the remnant. Your next season needs consistent voices that carry weight, and what's coming will go even deeper. And if you made it all the way to the end, type this in the comments. I heard him. I'm ready. Let it be your declaration. Let it be your altar. Let heaven see your surrender. And before you go, hit that like button, not just to support the message, but to push this word to the people who need it most. Your click could be someone else's confirmation. Now don't stop here. What comes next carries even more fire. Tap on the next video that's on your screen right now. And if the chosen one isn't losing, they're being purified for the final battle. Let's keep going. This war has just begun.